Blossom, a poor virgin, is offered $10 million in exchange for something far more priceless, her virginity. Faced with a life-changing temptation, she's torn between the money that could lift her family out of poverty and the dignity she's fought so hard to preserve. Will she give in to the offer, or will her heart lead her down a different path? The choice could cost her everything. You won't believe how her story ends. Hey there. If this is your first time here, welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Share it with your friends and family so they don't miss out. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. David Maxwell was a wealthy man. At 35, he had everything anyone could ever want: money, power, luxury, but nothing seemed to fill the emptiness inside him. A ruthless billionaire entrepreneur, he had built his empire from the ground up, but he'd never been content with just business. To him, life was about living on the edge, wild parties, fast cars, and a never-ending parade of beautiful women. He was the type of man who could walk into any room and immediately command attention, not just because of his wealth, but because of the reckless confidence that oozed from every inch of him. David's life was a series of nights in upscale clubs, private jets, and lavish resorts. He reveled in his womanizing ways, seducing women with his charm, then discarding them as quickly as he'd swept them off their feet. Relationships didn't interest him. Commitment was a joke. The thrill of the chase, of conquest, was all that mattered. He had no intentions of changing his ways, even as the years went by. His friends admired his lifestyle, envied his freedom, but there was a growing sense of hollowness beneath the surface. Still, that didn't stop him from living recklessly. One night, after a particularly wild celebration with his closest friends in a high-end Manhattan club, David found himself in the middle of a conversation that would alter his life. Sitting at a VIP table, his friend Mark, a successful but selfish investment banker, made a challenge. "I bet you can't get a virgin to sleep with you," he said, his voice laced with laughter. The group burst into chuckles, but David, always up for a challenge, leaned back in his chair, the gleam of competition in his eyes. "You're on," David said with a grin. "I'll get it done, no problem." The room fell silent as Mark smirked, convinced the bet was a foregone conclusion. But for David, this was more than a mere dare. It was about proving that nothing was beyond his reach, that no woman, no matter how innocent or untouched, was immune to his charms. The terms of the bet were simple. David had to find a virgin, seduce her, and sleep with her. If he succeeded, Mark would pay him a hefty sum, but if he failed, David would owe him double. The night ended with laughter and boasting, but in the quiet of his private penthouse later that evening, David's mind raced. He didn't just want to win the bet, he wanted to prove that he could conquer anyone. And there was a curiosity growing within him about the challenge itself. How hard could it be to seduce a virgin in a world where women were often after the very things he had in abundance: wealth, power, status? Determined to win, David picked up his phone and reached out to a high-end agency known for handling exclusive requests. It didn't take long before he was presented with a list of potential candidates. He scrolled through the profiles, but one name stood out: Blossom. A young woman from a small, poor town. A virgin, untouched and pure. This was exactly the type of woman David was looking for. He didn't care about the details, he didn't even care to understand her. What mattered was that he had found her, and now he just needed to make her an offer she couldn't refuse. The email came through just as Blossom was finishing the night's chores in her tiny apartment. Her family's financial struggles were constant, and every day seemed like a battle to make ends meet. The pressure to contribute was immense. Her father's health had worsened, and her mother had been laid off from her job. Blossom, though young and inexperienced, carried the weight of their survival on her shoulders. She tried everything: odd jobs, long hours at the local market, and even tutoring younger children in the neighborhood. Yet, no matter how hard she worked, the money was never enough. Then, she received the email. At first, she thought it was a scam, one of those ridiculous offers promising riches for doing something unimaginable. But as she read through it, her disbelief grew. The email came from a high-end agency, offering an unprecedented sum of $10 million in exchange for her virginity. The terms were clear: she had to meet the client, a billionaire businessman, and if she agreed to the deal, she would receive the money in full. Blossom stared at the screen, her heart pounding. $10 million. The amount was enough to pay off her family's debts, secure their future, and provide for everything they needed. It was the solution to all her problems. The money was irresistible, a dream that seemed too good to be true. But there was something inside her that recoiled at the thought of such an arrangement. Her virginity, her most personal and sacred possession, could not simply be bought, no matter how much money was offered. She couldn't imagine giving that up to a stranger, no matter how wealthy he was. Her phone buzzed again, another reminder of the desperation that haunted her family's situation. But still, Blossom hesitated. She wasn't naive. She knew that women, especially women from her background, were often treated as commodities. She wasn't just a girl, she was a product to be bought and sold. The thought of surrendering herself in exchange for money sickened her, yet the reality of her family's situation made her feel trapped. Blossom composed herself and picked up the phone. She called the agency, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry, but I cannot accept your offer. I cannot sell something so precious for money," she said firmly, before hanging up. But as the phone call ended, she couldn't shake the sense of doubt. Could she really turn down such an offer? Was she doing the right thing? She knew that without the money, her family's problems wouldn't disappear. As the weight of the decision settled in, Blossom realized that her life, as she knew it, would never be the same again. But she had made her choice, for now. David Maxwell had been taken aback when Blossom refused his offer. He was used to getting everything he wanted. He had always been confident in his ability to make anyone bend to his will, especially women. His wealth, charm, and influence were his tools, and he'd always known how to use them to his advantage. But this time, the rejection felt different. This wasn't a simple refusal, it was an outright challenge to everything he believed about his own power. How could a woman, especially one as poor and vulnerable as Blossom, turn down $10 million? Sitting in his sleek penthouse office, David replayed the conversation over and over in his mind. He had thought the offer would be irresistible. After all, who could turn down that much money? But Blossom's reaction had shaken him. It was as if she wasn't driven by the same things he was. She wasn't interested in the material world he inhabited. She was unshakably firm in her morals and ideals, despite her financial struggles. When David's friends caught wind of the rejection, they wasted no time in mocking him. At their usual hangout spot, an exclusive club in the heart of the city, Mark and the others laughed as they sipped their drinks. "Man, you couldn't even get a virgin to sleep with you? You have to pay up," Mark teased, nudging David with a smirk. The others joined in with boisterous laughter, and David's pride stung. "You must be losing your touch," another friend chimed in. David Maxwell? The master of seduction? Can't even close a deal with a poor virgin? That's a new one. David's jaw tightened, his ego bruised. He was the man who had everything, money, status, women, but this rejection felt like a direct hit to his identity. He didn't just want to win the bet, he needed to prove to everyone, and to himself, that no woman, no matter how innocent or pure, was beyond his reach. With his friends still laughing, David clenched his fists. He wasn't about to let this go. He would win. He would make Blossom fall for him, and when she did, he would have everything he desired. The stakes had changed now. It wasn't just about the bet anymore, it was about proving that no one could resist him. David Maxwell sat in his car, staring at the small bookstore in front of him. This was the place he had found out about through his research. Blossom worked here. She didn't know him, and he knew her only through the agency. She had rejected his offer, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. This time, he wasn't going to use money to win her over. He would approach her as just another man, showing her that he could be someone different, someone real. David got out of the car and walked into the bookstore. The small bell above the door rang as he entered, and he took a deep breath. He wasn't a billionaire today. He was just David, a regular guy looking for a good book. He hoped that this would give him a chance to talk to her, without her knowing who he really was. Blossom was behind the counter, sorting through some books. She didn't look up when he entered, so David took his time looking around the shelves. He could hear the soft sound of pages turning as he walked past her, but he wasn't in any rush. He had to make sure he didn't draw attention to himself. After a few minutes, David casually walked up to the counter where Blossom was standing. She looked up, and David gave her a warm smile. "Hi there," he said. "I'm looking for a good book. Something different, maybe? Do you have any recommendations?" Blossom looked at him with a polite but neutral expression. She didn't seem impressed by his appearance, which was just what David was hoping for. He didn't want to be seen as the rich billionaire right now. He wanted to be seen as just another person, talking to her like anyone else. "Well, it depends on what you like," Blossom said, glancing at the shelves behind her. "We have a lot of fiction and self-help books. What are you into?" David thought for a moment. "I guess I want something that'll make me think. Something that feels real." Blossom nodded. "I think I've got something that might fit. Here, try this one." She handed him a book from the shelf. David took the book from her, feeling a small spark of interest. Thanks. I appreciate it. He looked at the cover, pretending to be absorbed in it, but really, he was just trying to figure out how to start a real conversation with her. So, do you enjoy reading books like this? David asked, his tone casual, hoping to break the ice. Blossom gave him a small smile. Yeah, I like reading books that make you think. It helps to escape sometimes. David smiled. I get that. Life can be a lot sometimes. Blossom nodded again, clearly not used to having deep conversations with customers. It can be, she said softly. But we all do what we can to get by. David noticed her tone was more thoughtful now, like she was sharing a little piece of herself. He took that as a good sign. I totally understand, David said, trying to sound like someone who could relate to her. I've been trying to do the same, figure out what matters in life. Blossom looked at him curiously, but she didn't say much. She seemed unsure if she should continue talking to him or just finish the transaction. But David didn't want to rush things. How long have you worked here? He asked, wanting to keep the conversation going. A few years now, she answered. It's a quiet job, but it's good. David smiled, his eyes softening. Sometimes that's all you need, right? The conversation had reached a natural end, but David wasn't ready to give up. He had to make her feel comfortable. Slowly, he decided to push his luck. I'm actually grabbing some coffee later, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. If you're not too busy, you could join me. I'd like to talk more about what you're reading. Blossom looked at him for a moment, surprised by the invitation. She hesitated, her thoughts clearly racing. He wasn't forcing her or making any promises, it was just coffee. I don't know, she began, her words trailing off. The truth was, she was still grappling with the thoughts of the offer, the money, the promise of a better life. But she didn't want to make a decision based on that. She wanted to figure out who David really was first, before anything else. David smiled softly, sensing her hesitation but not pushing. No pressure at all, he said. Just an offer. If you change your mind, I'll be there. With that, David walked out of the bookstore, leaving Blossom with her thoughts. He knew it was only the first step, but it was the first of many. He had to make her trust him, make her feel like he was interested in her for who she was, not for what she could offer him. And he was willing to take it slow, if that's what it took. David waited at the cafe the next day, just like he had said. He watched the clock tick by, his fingers drumming lightly on his coffee cup, but Blossom never showed up. She hadn't texted or called to cancel. She hadn't given him any reason for her absence. She simply wasn't there. At first, he felt frustrated, even a little embarrassed. He had stepped out of his comfort zone, offering her a chance for something real, and she had ignored it. But David quickly brushed off his irritation. He wasn't going to give up so easily. This was just the beginning. If he had learned anything over the years, it was that nothing worth having came without effort. And if he really wanted to win Blossom over, he was going to have to put in the work. The next day, he returned to the bookstore. He didn't know exactly what he would say to her, but he knew he needed to show her he was serious. This wasn't about the bet anymore. It wasn't even about the money. He was genuinely starting to care about her. Blossom was behind the counter, as usual. She didn't look up when he entered, but David didn't mind. He casually wandered through the aisles, pretending to browse. He wasn't in any rush. He knew she would notice him eventually. After a few minutes, he approached the counter. She looked up, her eyes briefly meeting his. She gave him a small smile, but it was distant, like she wasn't quite sure what to make of him. Back again, she said, her voice polite but guarded. David gave her a friendly smile. Yeah, I'm in the area a lot. Thought I'd stop by again. I've been thinking about what you said last time. You're right. Life can be a lot. Blossom's eyes softened a little, but she didn't say anything right away. She simply nodded, then turned her attention to the books in front of her. David wasn't discouraged. He wasn't expecting her to open up immediately. Instead of rushing the conversation, he decided to take things slow. Do you ever take a break? He asked casually. I'm sure it gets busy here sometimes. Blossom shrugged. Sometimes. But it's alright that it keeps me busy. David could see she was still holding back, still unsure about him. He decided not to push too hard. He reached for a book on the shelf and held it out. I was thinking about getting this one, he said. What do you think? Blossom glanced at the book, her interest piqued. It's a good read. A lot of people come in asking for it. David nodded. Maybe I'll give it a try. He smiled, trying to keep the mood light. You've got great taste. Blossom gave him a small smile back, but it was still cautious. She didn't seem ready to engage much more than that. David wasn't ready to give up, though. He continued showing up every day, not just for the books, but to see her. Each time he entered the bookstore, he made sure to keep the conversation casual and friendly. Some days, he didn't even mention anything about their previous talks. He just showed up and tried to get to know her little by little. And over time, something started to shift. Blossom began to notice him more. She wasn't as distant as she had been before. She would greet him with a small smile when he walked in. Sometimes, they would talk about books, or about her day, or about things that seemed simple, but in those moments, there was an easy connection that formed between them. David even started showing up on days when the bookstore was quiet, sitting at the small table in the corner, pretending to read or drink coffee, just to be near her. He wasn't expecting her to fall for him right away, he knew it would take time. But he was patient. He was showing her, slowly, that he was different from what she probably expected. One afternoon, a week after the coffee invitation, David entered the bookstore and found it busier than usual. Blossom was running around, helping customers, stocking shelves, and answering calls. David waited until she had a moment, then casually approached her. "You've been busy today," he said, smiling. Blossom looked up, her expression slightly worn but still kind. "Yeah, it's been one of those days. Lots to do." David nodded sympathetically. "If you ever need a break, I'm just down the street. I could use some company. A coffee or something. No pressure, just a friendly offer." Blossom paused for a moment, her eyes searching his face. There was something different about him. She couldn't quite figure it out, but she wasn't as suspicious as she had been before. He wasn't pushing her, and he wasn't trying to rush anything. He was just being normal. "I'll think about it," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. That was the first time she'd said anything positive about their plans, even if it was just a maybe. David felt small victory. It wasn't much, but it was progress. David sat at the cafe again, watching the clock tick by. His coffee had gone cold, and his patience had worn thin. Blossom hadn't shown up, not this time, not the last time, and not any of the times before. She hadn't texted, hadn't called, hadn't even given him a reason for her absence. She simply wasn't coming. He had been persistent. He'd kept showing up at the bookstore, striking up casual conversations, even suggesting coffee a few more times. But each time, she politely rejected him. He was getting frustrated. No one had ever rejected him like this, not in business, not in relationships, not in anything. And his pride couldn't handle it. David wasn't used to losing. It didn't matter what the bet was, he wasn't going to let this one go. He had promised his friends he would do it, and he wasn't about to look weak in their eyes. More than that, he was starting to realize that the challenge had become personal. It wasn't just about winning the bet. It was about proving to himself that he could win her over, not with money, but with genuine effort. He couldn't afford to lose this. His pride wouldn't allow it. As he sat there, staring at his cold coffee, an idea began to form in his mind. He knew that Blossom was deeply religious. He had overheard her mention going to church a few times while they talked. That was it. If he couldn't get to her through casual conversations or coffee invites, maybe he could find another way. He didn't just want to be the rich guy, he wanted to be someone she could trust, someone she could connect with on a deeper level. So, the next Sunday, David showed up at her church. It wasn't a large church, but it had a sense of warmth and community. David felt out of place at first, sitting among people who looked at him with curious eyes. He wasn't used to being around so many humble people, and the simplicity of the church was a stark contrast to the luxury of his usual world. But he stuck it out, keeping a low profile, not drawing attention to himself. After the service, David stood near the exit, watching the congregation chat and mingle. He knew Blossom would be there, and when she finally walked out, he saw her, dressed modestly in a simple dress, chatting with a few friends. For a moment, he hesitated. He had never done anything like this before, but something in him told him this was his chance. "Blossom," he called out, his voice calm but loud enough to catch her attention. Blossom turned around, her expression softening when she saw him. "David?" she asked, a bit surprised. "What are you doing here?" David smiled, trying to look casual. "I thought I'd check it out. Thought I'd see what you're always talking about." He gestured to the church. "Seems like a good place." Blossom looked at him carefully, her brow slightly furrowed. "You came to church?" she asked skeptically, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him or not. David nodded, his smile sincere. I wanted to understand more about you, what matters to you. I know it's important to you, so I thought I'd try it out. Blossom was silent for a moment, her eyes searching his face. She couldn't tell if he was being genuine, but there was something about his tone, something different from the confident businessman she had seen before. Maybe he was serious. Maybe he really did want to get to know her better, not just as a woman to be won, but as a person. I appreciate it, she said softly, her voice quieter than usual. But church isn't some kind of game to me, David. It's my faith. David's expression softened. I get that. I'm not here to play games, he said earnestly. I just want to know you better. Blossom studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, she said, her voice hesitant. But if you're serious about this, I won't tolerate any disrespect. You need to understand that. David smiled softly, feeling the weight of her words. Of course. I respect that. After a moment of silence, Blossom gave him a small, almost shy smile. Well, I'm grabbing lunch now, she said, glancing around. Would you like to join me? Just the two of us, if you're free. We can talk more. David felt his heart skip a beat. It wasn't a yes to a date, but it was progress. It was a step forward, and he couldn't help but feel like he had finally broken through. I'd like that, he said, his voice warm with gratitude. Blossom nodded and led the way. They walked together down the street to a small cafe. As they sat down, the conversation began easily. They talked about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. David listened intently, paying close attention to every word she said, realizing that this was more than just an opportunity to win her over, it was a chance to connect with her on a deeper level. For the first time, David didn't feel like he was playing a game. He felt like he was simply talking to someone he genuinely liked, someone who mattered. And for Blossom, it was the first time she felt like maybe, just maybe, David more than the arrogant businessman she had first thought. As they shared lunch, a new sense of possibility began to grow between them. This was only the beginning, but it felt like a new chapter was starting, one where the game had stopped, and real connection could finally begin. After their first lunch together, things between David and Blossom started to shift in a way neither of them had expected. David showed up at the bookstore more often, not just as a customer, but as someone who genuinely wanted to spend time with Blossom. He would find small reasons to visit, asking her about books, checking in on how her day was going, or simply chatting with her in a casual way. At first, Blossom wasn't sure what to make of his visits. She had never been in a situation like this before. She wasn't used to being courted, especially not by someone as wealthy and powerful as David. But there was something about his presence that felt genuine. He wasn't pushing her. He was patient, kind, and attentive. He wasn't trying to impress her with his money or his connections. He just wanted to get to know her. One day, after a few visits, David handed Blossom a small wrapped package as he entered the bookstore. I saw this, and I thought of you, he said, his voice casual, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. Blossom raised an eyebrow, looking at the small gift. You didn't have to get me anything, she said, a little surprised. David smiled, shrugging it off. It's nothing big. Just something I thought you might like. She carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a simple notebook with a soft, leather cover. I thought you might enjoy writing in this, he said. You mentioned you like to keep a journal. Blossom looked up at him, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It wasn't expensive or flashy, just a simple, meaningful gesture. It felt personal, and that made her feel special. Thank you, she said, her voice soft with appreciation. David smiled, watching her for a moment before turning to leave. I'm glad you like it, he said. I'll see you around. As the days passed, David continued to show up, and with each visit, he brought small, thoughtful gifts, nothing extravagant, just simple things. A box of her favorite tea. A small potted plant for the counter. A book he thought she'd enjoy. Each gift was accompanied by a small note, written in his neat handwriting. Sometimes the notes were funny, other times thoughtful. Thought this might brighten your day, one note read. Another said, for your quiet moments, when you need to escape into something new. Blossom didn't expect any of this. She hadn't known how to react at first, but as the days went on, she found herself looking forward to seeing David. He was always kind, always respectful, never rushing her or asking for anything in return. His simple gestures made her feel something she hadn't expected, a growing affection. She began to realize that she was slowly falling for him. She wasn't sure when it had started, but she could feel it. Every time he smiled at her, every time he gave her a small gift, she felt a warmth inside her chest. She started to look forward to his visits, even if they were brief. He had a way of making her feel seen and appreciated, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, after a particularly busy day at the bookstore, Blossom was sitting behind the counter when David came in again. This time, he didn't have a gift, just his usual friendly smile. "Hey, how's your day going?" he asked, leaning on the counter. Blossom looked up, a small smile forming on her lips. "It's been all right. Busy, but I'm getting through it." David nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. Want to grab a coffee after work?" Blossom hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure. I'd like that." The idea of spending more time with him felt nice. They had talked so much over the past weeks, but this time it would be just the two of them, without distractions. And for the first time, Blossom realized she was looking forward to it, not just because of the company, but because of who David was becoming in her life. After work, they went to the same cafe they had been to before. This time, the conversation flowed easily, like they were old friends catching up. David shared funny stories about his childhood, and Blossom opened up a little more about her life, her dreams, and her fears. The more they talked, the more Blossom felt that David wasn't just a billionaire with a bet to win, he was a man she could connect with on a deeper level. He had shown her kindness, patience, and respect, things that she had rarely seen from men before. And with each passing moment, she found herself falling a little more. As they sat there, talking and laughing, David's eyes softened. "I really enjoy these moments," he said quietly. "I like getting to know you, Blossom." Blossom's heart skipped a beat. There was something in his voice, something sincere. She hadn't expected him to be so open, so real. "Me too," she said softly. "It's nice to just be us." David smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I'm glad you think so. I like the person I'm getting to know." For a moment, they just sat there, the weight of the unspoken connection between them hanging in the air. Neither of them rushed to break the silence. As they left the cafe later, David walked her home. Before she went inside, he stopped and looked at her with a smile. "I'll see you soon," he said. Blossom smiled back, feeling something she hadn't expected, a sense of peace. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'll see you soon." David watched her go inside, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about winning her over anymore. It was about something real, something he wasn't sure he'd ever expected. He was starting to feel like he was falling for her too. The air felt a little lighter the day David decided to take the next step with Blossom. He had been patient, waiting for the right moment, and now he knew it was time. He had enjoyed their time together so much, and he realized that he wanted more. He wanted Blossom to be his, officially. That afternoon, David showed up at the bookstore with a small bouquet of fresh flowers in his hand. The bright colors of the blooms stood out against the quiet warmth of the store. He knew Blossom loved fresh flowers, and this simple gesture seemed perfect for the moment. When Blossom saw him enter, she smiled, but her expression shifted slightly when she noticed the flowers. "David, these are beautiful," she said, her voice soft with surprise. "I thought you might like them," he said with a smile, handing her the bouquet. "But that's not all." From behind his back, he pulled out a small gift-wrapped package and set it on the counter. Blossom raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" she asked, curious. David gave her a playful smile. "Something special," he said. "I know how much you love Fresh Flows by your favorite author. And I heard the author was doing a signing event. Well, I managed to get a signed copy for you." Blossom's eyes widened in shock as she unwrapped the package, revealing the book with the author's signature on the inside cover. She gasped softly. "David, you really got me this." David nodded, his eyes soft. "I wanted to do something nice for you. You've mentioned this book so many times, and I thought, you deserve something special." Blossom was speechless for a moment, holding the book in her hands like it was a precious treasure. She couldn't believe he had gone out of his way to get it for her. This is amazing," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much, David." David smiled, his heart swelling at how happy she looked. "You're welcome," he said gently. "You deserve it." There was a long pause, the warmth of the moment hanging between them. Blossom glanced up at David, her eyes soft and full of gratitude. She hadn't expected anything like this from him, and it made her realize just how much he had been paying attention to the little things she loved. David, sensing that this was the perfect moment, took a step closer to her. "Blossom, I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I want to be more than just someone you see around town. I want to be with you, officially." He paused, his voice sincere. Will you be my girlfriend? Blossom's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at him. She hadn't expected him to ask this so soon, but in her heart, she knew it was what she wanted. She felt a deep connection with him, one that had been growing every time they spent time together. Yes, she said quietly, a soft smile breaking across her face. I'd like that. The moment the words left her mouth, David's smile grew wider, and before either of them could say anything else, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't rushed, but it was filled with a tenderness that made Blossom's heart race. It was her first real kiss, slow, gentle, and full of promise. As their lips met, David could feel her hesitation, the slight nervousness that made the kiss even more precious. He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. Blossom blushed, her cheeks turning pink. She was still new to this, still learning what it meant to be with someone in this way. David noticed the slight nervousness in her and couldn't help but fall deeper for her. She was so different from the other women he had known. The way she held back, her innocent shyness, it was all so new and pure. It made him want to protect her, to cherish her more than anything. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and smiled softly. You're different, Blossom, he said quietly, his voice full of admiration. In the best possible way. Blossom smiled shyly, feeling a warmth she had never known. I think you'd too. David felt his heart swell with a sense of joy and peace that he had never felt before. He had been searching for something real, something beyond the empty relationships he had known in the past, and now, in front of him, was the person who made everything else seem insignificant. Blossom wasn't just a challenge or a game to him. She was someone he cared about deeply. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, both realizing that this was the beginning of something new. Something genuine. David had found what he hadn't even known he was looking for, and Blossom had found someone who, despite his wealth and status, saw her for who she really was. As the day went on, they spent more time together, walking through the quiet streets, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't about the bet anymore, it was about the connection they were building. And for David, it was the happiest he had felt in a long time. He was finally with someone who made him feel like he could just be himself, without needing to prove anything. Blossom, too, felt a peace she had never known before. She had always been cautious with her heart, but now, with David, she felt safe. She felt like she could trust him, something she hadn't expected when they first met. He wasn't like the others. He was real. And for the first time, It had been a few weeks since David and Blossom had officially started dating, and their relationship had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. David had completely forgotten about the bet. At first, it had been the driving force behind his pursuit of her, but now, with each passing day, he realized that he wasn't just trying to win. He was truly falling for Blossom. He didn't need the bet to keep him going anymore. He just wanted to make her happy. Every day, without fail, David showed up with fresh flowers, thoughtful notes, or small gifts. Sometimes it was a book he knew she'd enjoy, or a coffee from her favorite cafe. Other times, it was just a simple gesture, a scarf to keep her warm in the winter, a little trinket that reminded him of something she'd mentioned in passing. Every gift was personal, something that showed he was thinking about her, even when they weren't together. Blossom couldn't help but smile whenever she saw David. He was always patient with her, never rushing anything, never making her feel pressured. He never asked for more than she was ready to give. The way he treated her made her heart flutter. She had never been treated like this before, like she truly mattered to someone, not because of what she could give them, but just for who she was. Each day she spent with him, Blossom found herself falling deeper for him. She wasn't sure when it had started, but she could feel it. Every time he smiled at her, every time he gave her a small gift, she felt a warmth inside her chest. She started to look forward to his visits, even if they were brief. He had a way of making her feel seen and appreciated, and that made all the difference. Later that week, David surprised Blossom with a weekend getaway. He had booked a small cabin by the lake, a peaceful, quiet place away from the hustle and bustle of the city. He thought it would be a nice break for the two of them, a chance to relax, enjoy each other's company, and take things to the next level, at her pace. When they arrived, the beauty of the place took Blossom's breath away. The trees were lush and green, and the lake shimmered under the setting sun. David was already smiling at the way her eyes lit up at the sight. "I thought you might like it," he said, his voice soft with affection. Blossom nodded, still in awe of the scenery. "It's beautiful, David. I love it." That night, after a peaceful dinner by the fireplace, they sat together on the couch, sharing stories and laughing. The connection between them had only grown stronger since they started dating. The spark was undeniable, and the way they looked at each other now was filled with tenderness. David gently took her hand, his thumb lightly brushing over her skin. "Blossom," he said softly, his voice low and steady, "I want you to know that I'm not rushing you into anything. I just want you to know that when you're ready, I'm here." Blossom looked up at him, her heart racing. She could feel the love in his words, in the way he held her hand so gently, as if he was waiting for her to make the decision. It was exactly what she needed. No pressure, no expectations, just the space to decide what was right for her. David leaned in closer, and for the first time, Blossom felt ready. She could see the trust in his eyes, the love that had been growing between them, and she knew, deep down, that she was ready to take the next step with him. She kissed him softly, pulling back to look into his eyes. "I'm ready, David."